Hello, this is D to the B here, and today I have another response video Star Wars related. Now yes, this has been in the works for a while. It took me forever to find a video to respond to, until I had the bright idea of covering Reylos, and I ended up finding this video right here by Full Fat Videos called Why Reylo Was Probably the Best Part of the Sequels. If you know me, I'm a massive sequel trilogy hater. I feel like it disrespects the franchise of Star Wars. And also, Reylo is an abomination of a relationship. I don't get why shippers like this relationship at all. This is a very abusive relationship. And this video does cover that, so why don't we get started with the video itself? Let's begin.
Introduced us to several new characters who would become the principal leads of the new sequel trilogy.
And they all suck. All of them. So why don't we start with Poe Dameron first. Poe Dameron was fine when I first watched The Force Awakens. Yeah, big shocker, I used to be a sequel fan. But as I thought about it more, and especially looking back on the trilogy after it released, like the whole trilogy together, Poe Dameron is not a very good character. He is obviously just a Han Solo ripoff, and not a very good one as well. Then we get to Finn. I originally liked Finn, and I still kind of do like Finn in The Force Awakens. Probably the most interesting character out of that whole movie. Like, he was the one I was rooting for. I thought he was going to be the main lead of the trilogy, because at the time, I thought it was such a cool concept to introduce a ex-stormtrooper into the series and kind of flesh out the stormtroopers a little bit. Until I found out that there were a bunch of ex-stormtroopers in the expanded universe, with the characters known as Kyle Katarn and X2. Who knows, there might even be more that I'm not aware of. Now, Finn is unoriginal, now knowing this information, but I think he's still a pretty enjoyable character in The Force Awakens. Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker completely butchered his character. And then Rey was always bland to me. She was fine when I first watched The Force Awakens, but I didn't really care for her character. The claims that she is a Mary Sue are very accurate, because there is not a lot of moments where she struggles in things. Like, think about it. She instantly learns how to use a one-sided lightsaber, even though a double-sided saber would have made more sense. She easily flew the Falcon, even though she has never flown a ship in her life, because if she did, she probably would have left Jakku already. And then also beating Kylo Ren 3 times, and also Emperor Palpatine in the end of Rise of Skywalker. Just, they're not good leads, unfortunately. Oh, and then Rose Tico, she sucks because she made The Last Jedi suck.
Amongst them were Rey and Kylo Ren. They only share a few scenes together, but the film established a poignant and important connection between the two of them, as opposing sides of both the Force and the conflict within the galaxy. As is the eternal cosmic law of the internet, and probably all things Tumblr, people started imagining what it would be like for these two characters to be together, spawning fanfiction, memes, and edits, a phenomenon you probably know as shipping. I think largely when people ship, it is wishful thinking, but it's...
Now, I'm doing the world a big favor by censoring this fan art. The Reylos are gonna go like, oh, you're censoring the best part of this video. But no, it is definitely not the best part of the video. I still don't know why this shipping is a thing. I think it's dialed down a bit since the sequel trilogy ended. You don't really hear much about Reylos anymore, but they still exist, and they're still a big problem. Now, the good taste, I'm going to say something maybe controversial, but I still stick with this opinion regardless. Shippers are one of the worst parts of any fandom. Now, I know everyone is not going to agree with me, and that's fair, but let me explain. The fan art itself isn't bad. It's nice to see people's talents and them showing like their artwork of a character they really like. It's honestly pretty cool, especially with the really talented people behind fan art. But when it comes to shipper fan art is where I draw the line. Shippers will bring up like the strangest relationships, even if they're in the same franchise or not. It's a ridiculous concept, and then also there are shippers that will go to the extreme with it and make fan art of them kissing or sexual activity. Even if it is an abusive relationship, like, let's say, Reylo, for example. Or even if it's two characters that don't really even work together that well in a relationship. Like, just, even if the characters, like, hate each other or something like that, people will just ship them for no good reason, even though they probably wouldn't be a good pair. But they still do it anyway, which is the problem. And it's funny too, because some of these shippers are the same kind of people that would make comments like, women shouldn't be just attractive for your male gazing, which is funny enough because they say that, but then they do this shipping nonsense. Now, this isn't the first time I've criticized shippers, and it probably will not be the last time, unfortunately. So, in my opinion, maybe it could be good attention, or it could be really bad intention. I'm more leaning towards really bad, because sometimes people won't put in the research, the effort. They'll just do it because it's fun, and not think about the repercussions of it.
Cool that people can watch something and take away from it that two characters should be together, because that's a pretty unique reading of a text sometimes. In the aftermath of that movie, the collective term Reylo was born. At the time, it was fan fiction. It was a niche idea that existed in the most far-flung corners of fandom. And then it became a reality. 2017 Star Wars The Last Jedi made Reylo canon, which is enough to stop and question why out of all possible infinite realities you ended up in this one. And what does that really mean? If I do something, is there another version of me that made the opposite choice? Do my choices mean anything? Do I matter? What's the point? Why do I exist?
Yeah, that's basically the concept of the multiverse, dude. So, going to his point about Reylo and the canon thing, they should have honestly never made that canon, because if you look at the films themselves, this relationship just doesn't work because of trauma that Kylo Ren has caused Rey, and then also all the horrible things he's done. Now, I could see people like, but what about Darth Vader? He got redeemed after all the things he did. He literally slaughtered children. And yes, that is true. That did happen. But the difference between Vader and Luke and Rey and Kylo, Darth Vader was Luke's son, obviously, as we all know. And Luke knew that there was some sort of light inside of his father. Now, yes, Vader might have ordered the stormtroopers to kill his aunt and uncle, and then also killed Obi-Wan. But once Luke found out Vader was his father, he tried to be more understanding of Anakin's misdeeds. The only difference between Luke and Vader and Rey and Kylo is Rey is not related to Kylo Ren, and even though she saw him commit atrocities right in front of her, mostly killing Han right in front of her and injuring Finn, this relationship shouldn't work in general. As I've said before, it's an abusive relationship. And though I have issues with him, I think Veto made a really good point in his Rise of Skywalker video with this whole abusive relationship thing. I will leave that video in the description because I think he did a good job breaking down The Rise of Skywalker. And who knows, maybe I'll throw in The Last Jedi video as well, because they're both good watches on his channel. Also, Rian Johnson probably threw this ship in to get all the Reylos to be excited and defend his garbage movie. Because The Last Jedi created the age where you couldn't criticize movies without being racist and sexist. So, yeah, that's probably the only reason he did it. People say that, oh, he's a Reylo himself. I don't believe that at all. I think he was on the internet, he saw it, and like, let's take advantage of that, is basically what I think happened. But I don't know. I wasn't there. But anyway, let's continue on.
And then, not only was it made canon, but the movie actually makes it work. It pushes the story forward for both characters, gives them distinct and interesting flaws, and
I mean, dude, I disagree with you, but sure, whatever flows your boat. But I will say, I don't think that this relationship between Kylo and Rey makes any sense. I think it's a weird concept for your main villain and your main hero to get into a relationship with each other when they're trying to fight each other, or mostly the villain's case, destroy their arch enemy. Now I can get somebody the lower ranks that betrays them going in to their team and then also having a relationship with your main hero. I can understand that. Like, a great example of it is, and I know this is gonna have nothing to do with Star Wars, but it's still an example. In Transformers Beast Wars, that was the case with Silverbolt and Black Arachnia. Black Arachnia wasn't the leader of the Predacon. She was just simply a foot soldier for Megatron. And her transition to Predacon to Maximal makes complete sense. Where unlike Kylo, he becomes the main bad guy of the Order, or he's the head honcho after Snoke dies, even though that was a complete wasted opportunity. Now, yes, I am aware the Sith constantly betray one another, which we will get into later, because he mentions this in the wrong way. But for him as the new leader of the First Order, or at least until Palpatine comes in out of nowhere and hijacks the whole thing. Now, one thing I forgot to mention in this video was that apparently this video was made before The Rise of Skywalker had even came out, if you couldn't tell already. So yeah, I will even be commentating on some things with The Rise of Skywalker as well, and maybe some other extended material like the shows. So let's move forward.
The next movie in the most interesting place it could possibly be.
Nah.
To kick things off, let's explore their first proper conversation in The Force Awakens, when Kylo has Rey captive and is about to interrogate her for the map to Luke Skywalker. There's a particular beat to that conversation which I think sets up so much of their relationship across both films, and it's an exchange that involves only one of them speaking.
That happens when you're being hunted by a creature in a mask.
Without hesitation, Kylo willingly shows Rey a piece of his humanity that he has been purposefully hiding for God knows how long. Don't you get the feeling that he's not shown anyone his face in a really long time?
Now, this one is going to be kind of quick because of two things, and I think they're very short. For one, no, this relationship was never built up in the beginning. I've seen Reylos going like, this thing has been around for the start. No, it hasn't. It really hasn't. You could perceive whatever you want, but it was definitely not in the original vision of J.J. Abrams if you compare The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It was not a planned out trilogy. Daisy Ridley confirmed this herself, and she was the one who played the garbage character known as Rey, so she would obviously know more than your typical Reylo shipper. But getting on to the second point, the claim that Kylo Ren hasn't shown his face to anyone isn't completely accurate, because there are a few Disney comics where Kylo Ren has showed his face to multiple people. One example is one issue where Snoke and Kylo Ren go to Dagobah to face Kylo Ren's fears or embrace his fears. I can't remember entirely the context of the comic. And Snoke makes him leave his helmet behind because Snoke hates that helmet with a burning passion. Now, this comic, I'm pretty sure, came out after, but the point still stands that this claim is not completely accurate. So why don't we move on from that?
Face value, and Kylo will respond by rising to the challenge, not always showing her his best self, but being willing to try and prove her wrong. Kylo negs Rey in their first conversation too. Kylo can't quite comprehend how someone so small could achieve what he cannot. Or rather, what we discover is that he is afraid of how someone so small could achieve what he cannot.
You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
I'll give you that, fair point, but granted, the whole Kylo Ren being jealous of Rey because she has reached feats that he has not, even though he's been obviously trained by Luke Skywalker, is a little bit too convenient. There have been examples of something like this working in the past. One example was Kung Fu Panda with the character known as Tai Lung. Tai Lung had put himself through intense training because Master Shifu said he could be the Dragon Warrior, but then was refused by Master Oogway, and then later, somehow, even though Tai Lung got more training than him, Poe managed to become the Dragon Warrior and defeat Tai Lung with skills that he did not even reach, even though he had received every single piece of training in the archives of Kung Fu. So something like that is possible, but unfortunately for Rey, she didn't get enough training where Poe and Tai Lung did. So it doesn't really work for Rey in writing-wise, but I get what you mean. So why don't we move on to the next thing you say?
She has darker tendencies, just like him. Also, all of this...
You're so lonely. At night, desperate to sleep.
He's talking about himself, whether he realises those parallels or not.
No duh, Captain Obvious. And also, it is sad that Rey is roasting the oblivion out of Kylo Ren for someone who was trained by Luke Skywalker himself. And something that I thought of that I didn't bring up in the last point is just weird that Rey is strangely calm with just knowing this information or sensing this information out of nowhere. Because when you gain an ability at first, you would generally be freaked out by it. Granted, I think there's an issue of her detecting something with the Force right away or a feeling, because Luke didn't gain that ability until Empire Strikes Back. And then Rey somehow gets it in her first movie. Yeah. I at least want her to learn the ability like later on in the film or the next film, or at least be freaked out that she was able to do that, because she is just like, I've done this before. And it definitely shows that she is a Mary Sue. But anyway, let's move on to a point that I've been waiting to talk about.
In their first fight, Kylo's initial feelings for Rey throw his judgment off balance, not to mention that gaping hole in his side. And she manages to get the better of him, once again channeling some of that darkness and turning it against Kylo, just as she did in the interrogation scene. Conversely, Kylo doesn't appear to actually want to kill her. He wants her.
I could show you the ways of the Force!
This is like the equivalent of Kylo asking Rey over to help out with her homework whilst his parents aren't home. It also shows that even from the beginning, he clearly had plans to usurp Snoke. Why else would he want to train her?
False! And I'm gonna do a sequel quote on you. Man, everything you just said is absolutely wrong. So, no, this was not the reason Kylo Ren wanted Rey. This is a common theme that is for the Sith. Once they see somebody that is very promising into the Force, they'll want to take advantage of that and bring that strong Force-sensitive person and make him/her into their apprentice, where most of the time they're going to plan to overthrow their master. This is nothing new. This is something that's been going on in Star Wars for ages. It happened in The Empire Strikes Back. Vader wanted to have Luke by his side to defeat the Emperor once and for all. Count Dooku technically did the same thing in Attack of the Clones with Obi-Wan, convincing him that he should come to the dark side or work together with him to defeat the Sith. And then this definitely happened with Anakin and Palpatine, where Palpatine was manipulating Anakin to following his mischievous deeds and destroying the Jedi and overthrowing the Republic to make it a grand new empire. It's not a romance thing, it was a Sith thing. They've been doing this, and I don't care if he's a Knight of Ren. He is technically a Sith. So, no, it's not because Kylo Ren wants to do homework with Rey while his parents are gone. No, this is just a theme with the Sith. They betray one another, and once they get somebody who is more powerful than their master, they're going to try to overthrow him and have this apprentice by their side to continue the new reign of the Sith until that apprentice kills their master and then gets a new apprentice. This is just something the Sith have been doing for a long time. That's why the rule of two exists, because if you consider the expanded universe timeline canon, which I do, the Sith before the rule of two were in an enormous number, but the Sith always betrayed one another, and it was hard to keep the grip of their power on the galaxy because there were too many of them and they wanted to overthrow each other. So, yeah, this was a stupid point. I don't care if it was a joke, it was inaccurate. Oh, and technically, even though Kylo Ren is injured, Rey has not wielded a lightsaber once, except for this moment specifically here in the start of the trilogy. Even with this injury, Kylo Ren should have still sliced her into pieces.
Cut to The Last Jedi, and both Kylo and Rey come into contact with their mentor figures and don't quite get what they expect or what they wanted. Snoke chastises Kylo for his failures in The Force Awakens, even going as far as to suggest that even he doesn't see him ever being as strong as Vader. And Rey hopes to find her place and get the answers she so desperately desires in Luke, only to find a cranky old hermit who wants nothing to do with the conflict in the galaxy.
Yeah, this is true. This does happen in the film. I think Snoke's was handled way better. Like, that scene is probably one of the only good scenes of The Last Jedi, and that's only because it is roasting Kylo Ren for being a terrible character in The Force Awakens and somehow losing to somebody who barely had any Force training. And then with Luke, this was outrageous with how they treated him. They turned him into a drunk hobo, and then they have him try to kill his nephew at some point, which does come up later in the video. And maybe it's a parallel, but it's not a good one since Luke isn't the way he's supposed to be. with that out of the way, let's continue on.
She has no purpose.
You are absolutely right about that.
It's a nice little setup which helps to emphasise their similarities and place them as two sides of the same coin. Sure, we establish Rey as the good guy, but I think we're told enough to think that maybe she isn't strictly sure.
And I'm afraid. I don't know what it is, or what to do with it.
In the same way Finn isn't sure if he's going to join the Resistance definitively, there's an alternate version of events where Snoke might have found Rey in her developing years, just like he did with Kylo, and I think the same thing could have happened. Rey and Kylo are ultimately the same person, but are shaped by very different experiences. So when they both find themselves emotionally alone in the movie, it's the perfect time for this to happen.
Great! One of the worst things about the gosh darn sequel trilogy, the forced Skype calls. I can understand, like, contacting someone from a distance, but them seeing each other and able to hurt them even though they're crazy distance from each other is absolutely nonsensical. And this is not how the Force works whatsoever. I do not know what Rian Johnson was thinking with this.
I love that we get the question of whether or not they can kill each other in this state right out of the way, forcing our characters to speak to each other but without one of them holding a position of power over the other, like with the interrogation scene. These Force Skype chats, as they've come to be called, are a great way to refresh the villain gets captured in the second act so the plot can put hero and villain together without fighting trope that we've seen in so many other movies.
Yes, this is true. This does happen in the film. But it still makes absolutely no sense. I would go more detail into it, but I've already explained it.
You're not doing this. The effort would kill you.
Kylo just has to belittle Rey as the First Order of business, probably because he gets belittled by Snoke and tossed around so often. He needs to do the same thing to someone else to establish his dominance. Never mind the fact that if the effort would kill her, then it would almost certainly kill him too. In their next Force chat, Kylo, now knowing there's no way they can fight each other, seems cooler and more collected, and instead asks questions.
Why is the Force connecting us?
Yeah, exactly. He's literally being a bully, is basically what you're saying. And how did these two end up together again?
Rey is still aggressive, perhaps because the element of fear is definitively gone. She's free to berate Kylo without having to worry about an engagement.
You are a monster.
Yes, I am.
I don't think he truly believes that. I think he's saying it to see if she truly believes that. Her expression in response is a dead giveaway to Kylo that she doesn't really know who he is. She doesn't really have the context and the knowledge to call him a monster wholeheartedly.
I mean, besides the fact that she killed Han Solo and also killed or helped kill billions on all those planets, which included one of the planets being a political planet, which, funny enough, was originally going to be Coruscant, but Disney had them change it, thank goodness. So I think there is complete justification for her to think he's a monster. It's completely justified.
I see Kylo get compared to Anakin a lot for obvious reasons, but I think Rey also mirrors who Padme is too.
Yeah, people need to stop being harsh to my boy Anakin. He did nothing wrong. Also, Padme and Rey are absolutely nothing like each other.
They both get to experience these people commit terrible acts, and they respond with kindness, with questioning, a degree of empathy. In fact, their empathy is both their greatest strength and their Achilles heel.
And now I'm going to debunk you on why comparing these two is accurate, where truly they're not accurate at all. So for Anakin, it's literally he was grieving over the loss of his mother. The mother he hadn't seen for 10 years and wanted to go back for, but wasn't allowed to because of the Jedi Order. There is a deleted line in Attack of the Clones where he blames Obi-Wan for his mother's death. it's found in the Attack of the Clones novel adaptation of that movie. And it would have actually been nice to see this in the film, because it would make sense that he would blame Obi-Wan and the Jedi for his mother's death because of the Jedi's strong belief of no connections, or personal attachments, I should say. And Anakin still has that issue, even though he's a Jedi. And they did not do a great job teaching him to not be attached to anyone. Where Rey, on the other hand, saw the murder of a person that she was growing to know and love because he was a role model for her. And she got to see Kylo Ren murder that role model, which was also his father. So yeah, this does not work whatsoever. And also, Anakin killing the Tuskens was completely justified because the Tuskens are savages. They're not people. They don't think. They're wild animals. This is something the Mandalorian got wrong in Season 2. But anyway, let's continue on.
Kylo telling Rey he's a monster is seemingly enough to make her want to dig deeper. It makes her question a path of redemption, just as it did in the stories of old. This in turn prompts Luke to give his version of the events that led to Ben's transformation into Kylo Ren, which is the first time we hear the story. This, if anything, warms Rey to Kylo even more. It frames the story more as Luke's failure rather than Kylo's choice.
And this story of Kylo Ren being Luke Skywalker's failures could have obviously been done without disgracing the character of Luke Skywalker. It is an absolute sham that Disney did that to him, and they only did that to him and killed him to disrespect the character and the fans that Luke Skywalker had. This story could have worked without destroying a legacy character. Now, I get Luke progressing since Return of the Jedi, but they more shattered his character by making him so depressed. Even in the beginning of A New Hope, he was still optimistic. So, yeah, screw you, Disney.
Leia, trust me with her son.
Almost absolving the then Ben Solo of any responsibility for his turn to the dark side. Even though Rey says that Kylo failed Luke, I don't necessarily think what she says is necessarily how she feels, given the actions she takes in the movie. She's trying to be a Jedi, and therefore trying to say the right thing. Then we come to the Ben Swolo scene. Oh yeah. Boom, boom. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I couldn't download the song from Ferris Bueller because of copyright, but you can hardly tell the difference.
So I already commentated on the whole destroying Luke Skywalker part. Might as well respond to whatever the heck that was. For a meme, you get an F++++. Bad job. I know Ben Swolo was a big meme when The Last Jedi came out. But seriously, what was that? And also, you can tell that modern Star Wars appeals to females because they basically turned that whole movie basically into one of those romance novels that you occasionally see a woman reading at like a amusement park or a pool. You know those books where you see a woman on there and then being held by a big muscular man. That is basically what they tried doing for The Last Jedi. Now, I know that Attack of the Clones did a romance subplot in the movie, but the difference was it still maintained its audience and not made it cringe. Now, yes, I know Attack of the Clones is not one of those movies that is looked too fondly on, but it is way better than The Last Jedi. 100%. Alright, anyway, let's move on.
And whilst the sexual attraction to Kylo is apparent, what's more interesting here is how easily he can cut to the core of her.
Your parents threw you away like garbage.
They didn't.
They did. But you can't stop needing them. It's your greatest weakness.
Now Kylo turns the tables on Rey and reads her mind to touch a nerve, touching on her weakness for her parents, something that he will exploit later to manipulate her in perhaps their most important moment. Kylo reveals to Rey the truth. Well, his version of it, that Luke tried to kill him, that the event of that horrific night where he laid waste to the Jedi Temple was born out of self-defense and fear rather than hatred.
Exposing what Rey was afraid of was something that should have been explored in The Force Awakens, more than Rey learning that ability out of nowhere and exposing Kylo Ren for his fears, but that is just me on that issue. Also, a point I forgot to mention before was Luke redeemed Darth Vader, the most evil person in existence. There is no way that Luke would think that Kylo Ren is worse than Vader to the point where he would kill him. That is unrealistic, because if you compare villains between Vader and Kylo Ren, Vader easily overtakes Kylo Ren 100%. Kylo Ren sucks as a villain. Compared to what Vader has done, Kylo Ren is nothing. Now, I could see someone saying, but wait, didn't you say Vader deserved to be redeemed? Well, yeah, I did, but the difference was Anakin was swayed into the dark side of the Force. Kylo Ren willingly joined the dark side of the Force and was tempted by the light side of the Force. So, yeah, there's a clear difference, and honestly, I wish they didn't have him be tempted by the light side of the Force, because we already had a redeeming arc from a Sith Lord in the saga, and that was Darth Vader. It would be nice to have a Star Wars movie where the villain isn't redeemable at all. The only villain that's irredeemable in Star Wars is Palpatine, and that's about it. Wouldn't it be nice, besides Palpatine, to have a Sith Lord in, like, Darth Vader's shoes be irredeemable? This is something Legends got right with Jason Solo. Now, I'm particularly not a huge fan of the Star Wars Legacy of the Force books so far. It's been alright, but I feel like it's a little stretched out. Was Jason Solo was tempted into the dark side like Darth Vader was, but he was worried about turning to the dark side like his grandfather at first, and then he turns to the dark side when Lamaya brings him into the dark side, and also the loss of his brother, I'm guessing, in the Huzong Vong War did not help with his transition to the dark side. Like, when he became a part of the dark side, he was pretty much lost forever. Like, in the next book, book 2 or 3, he literally kills a bounty hunter that was trying to assassinate somebody without any remorse. And this bounty hunter turned out to be the daughter of Boba Fett. And at some point, I know Jaina kills Jason Solo, so yeah, he never really had a redemption arc. Granted, Jason Solo also had a reason for turning to the dark side, because if I'm remembering right from a bunch of videos that I watched, Jason Solo turned to the dark side because he saw into the future of Star Wars Legacy, where the Sith overthrow the Jedi once again, and there's a new Sith World Order, and he's trying to prevent that Sith Order from rising. But enough about the better timeline. Let's go on to his next point.
I wonder, has he ever told anyone else this, save for Rey? The barriers between them get broken down.
I'd never felt so alone.
You're not alone.
As Luke becomes a seemingly malicious figure to Kylo, or Ben's, sympathetic persona, they begin to trust each other. Suddenly it's no longer about the fate of the galaxy or the bloodshed, it's about each other. It's about opening up and realising the power in the Force that they share. And in the crescendo to this sequence of events, they feel each other's touch.
Please don't tell me you're one of those people that believes that the finger touching with Kylo Ren and Rey is basically finger sex. Please don't tell me you actually believe that. Or the claim that them touching fingers was like the most sexual thing in Star Wars. Even though that is not true, because there's been more sexual stuff in Star Wars in the past, especially Anakin and Padme obviously doing it so then we could have Luke and Leia, and then obviously Solo and Leia did it at some point too, because we have Kylo Ren. Unless if JJ's plagiarism's claim of him being an incest child is true. I'm joking. But continuing on with your next point that you made is, has Kylo Ren even told anyone about it? Well, from what it sounds like, from the context of the film, it sounded like he killed all the Jedi apprentices and left after that. So, probably not. He didn't go back to Coruscant or wherever Leia lived, which apparently in the Disney timeline, Leia was kicked out of the Senate because she was related to Darth Vader. Now, you're wondering, how do I know this? Well, I follow a bunch of people on the internet who have heard stuff or have actually read Disney's garbage books. I've only read one Disney book for Star Wars, and that... Actually, no, two. I read the Ahsoka novel, which is the best one out of their catalog, and a stupid children's book from the High Republic when I was at a Barnes & Noble one time with a friend of mine. So, yeah, definitely not, because if he actually told, like, his mom, I think we would have had, like, a bigger scandal on the Jedi Council, and that would have been a whole thing. I don't know how the Jedi Code stuff works. Unlike education, I don't know how that works. So, yeah, why don't we just move on?
From stars apart. Why is this so refreshing in a Star Wars movie? Well, the series up until this point had focused on diametrically opposed family units in terms of fathers and sons or brothers, almost always framed from the viewpoint of warrior monks, often sexless.
Now, this isn't entirely true because, again, George Lucas did put some sexual things in Star Wars. Now, yes, seeing it actually happen is another story, but that's because Star Wars is a kid's brand. I know OT purists don't want to hear it, but that is the truth. Star Wars has always been meant for kids, both the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. Now, just because it's a kids' film doesn't mean it can't be good. There are plenty of kids' media that is loved by adults for generations to come. And it's weird to hear that when it comes to the prequel trilogy, where they're like, oh, it's for kids, and it's dumb now, so... Yeah, because you can have good kids' media that both adults and children like, but mostly people hate it because, oh, it's not like the OT, it's not a rehash like the sequel trilogy ended up being, which ended up killing Star Wars in the process. And also, another problem with Reylos is they have a strange tendency of wanting actual sex scenes in Star Wars, even though it's a kid's brand. They did it with Reylo. They're doing it now with Oshamir in The Acolyte. So, well, actually, no, they're not doing that anymore because it got canceled. But my point still stands. Let's move on.
But here we get a different take on family. The lover, the person that you bring into your family with the hopes of companionship and belonging. Sure, we've seen romance before, but it was always outside of or as a response to the Force. It's interesting here to use the Force in a sexual way, which is the antithesis of how it is used in the prequels, where it is used as a barrier to love. Here it is used as a conduit. You could even speculate that Luke taught his generation of Jedi to love, as a direct departure to the old, emotionally stunted Jedi code that brought about his father's self-destruction. The sexual tension between Ben and Rey comes from what we don't see. Yeah, they're just touching hands, but between two Force wielders, this might as well be a full-blown sex scene.
Now, yes, that is also true. The Force in the prequel trilogy was the barrier of Jedis falling in love with somebody because they believed that there was nothing but the Force. Now, yes, the family dynamic is pretty much a staple of the Star Wars franchise. And this claim that the Force, using the Force for romance or sexual, I don't care, is just not how the Force works at all. Stop. And gosh darn it, you are one of those people. And also, I had a lot of issues implementing this video because I had to get the whole thing, but the video kept switching the size of the picture of the clips, so I couldn't get anything perfect. So here's a screenshot of what the text he said in the last part of that clip said, so you get an idea.
You will not bow before Snoke. He'll turn.
That's probably the sexiest moment in any Star Wars movie ever. And this moment takes us to Snoke's throne room, where Ben brings Rey to the Lord Commander of the First Order himself. He taunts Rey just like the Emperor taunted Luke. We see Ben in the scenario as a Vader figure, just like his grandfather. We've learnt things about him that have caused our hero to see his potential for good. So when this happens, it feels like the most logical move for Ben Solo to make. I love this look between them. I mean, really, if there wasn't a bunch of goons to fight off immediately, they probably would have made all that fanfiction a reality right then and there.
Oh no, I'm so sad that we didn't get... Nah, I'm kidding, I'm good. I'm okay with the action scene. Even if the action scene itself sucks, and also... killing off Snoke the way they did was so unbelievably dumb because we didn't even get to know what the guy was like at all. We knew nothing about his past, but then Rise of Skywalker ended up making him a puppet for Palpatine, even though Snoke had his own goals, unlike Palpatine. But they had to fix this problem caused by Rian Johnson. Thanks a lot, lying Rian Johnson. Thanks a lot.
And then Ben Solo remains a flutter. Kylo Ren returns.
I want you to join me. We can rule together and bring a new order to the galaxy.
Don't do this, Ben.
He negs her, he belittles her just as he did a movie ago.
Honestly, the fact that Rey didn't see that coming was so foolish in her part. Not gonna lie.
You have no place in this story. You come from nothing. You're nothing. But not to me.
We know for a fact that he thinks her need to find her parents is her greatest weakness. He doesn't hesitate to use it against her. He wants Rey, that much is clear, but only as someone to have by his side whilst he continues to fall into darkness. Killing Snoke wasn't for the galaxy, or even for Rey really, it was just for him. What Rey learns in this scene is that she was right. There is good in Ben, but not enough. He doesn't quite understand why she was infatuated with him in the first place. He hasn't learned quite as much as she hoped he had. It's still about power, it's still about control. Kylo only knew abuse under Snoke and betrayal under Luke, so that's really all he knows how to do. A few days spent with Rey isn't going to fix those deep-seated issues, and I think she realises at this point in the movie that it's not her job to. It's not her job to be the shoulder to cry on for someone who can faintly promise her kindness later on. This is why I'm kind of shocked at the response to Reylo, particularly after The Last Jedi. Yeah, it's all fun and games until you realise how abusive he is. Yet you'll still find fan groups lauding their relationship, art showing them passionately embracing, and I mean, look at some of these comments. I'm not necessarily blaming the audience here. Kylo is supposed to be charming and likeable in a sense. The same game he's running on Rey is obviously coming through to the audience because we're caught up in those feelings that are being conveyed. But the movie also loudly and clearly tells you that, of course, Reylo is fucked up.
Then why do you support it then? Why do you say it's good? You know it's abusive, but you stand by it. It doesn't make any sense. You either don't acknowledge that it's toxic and you're for it, or you acknowledge it's toxic and you're against it. Like, make up your mind, dude.
Really, they established that from the get-go.
You know I can take whatever I want.
I'm not giving you anything.
We'll see.
No, you won't see, you entitled little shit. Part of Rey's arc in The Last Jedi is realising that they might share a connection, but he is toxic, and unless he changes, they cannot be together. I highly doubt at this stage Kylo Ren will ever be redeemed. I don't see that kind of arc in store for him because he didn't tragically turn to the dark side like Vader did. He made the decision to fully affirm his dark side allegiance with a calculated leadership coup. But if he were to turn, it can't be because of Rey. It needs to come from a situation in which he has to make a fully autonomous decision. Rey can't and shouldn't be the one to fix him, which doesn't mean they won't necessarily be together in the next film. In fact, I think that's exactly where it's going. Because just like any real toxic relationship, Kylo might preach that he has changed, and Rey, despite having had that arc, despite knowing that it might all be bullshit, she might take him up on it anyway. The cycle might continue, and that might make for a really interesting, tragic end to their story. You can tell even as she literally and metaphorically closes the door on him, she wishes he might still be what she wants him to be.
Hate to bring it up, but that's exactly what happened.
A good person. And we haven't yet seen enough of Rey to truly know whether she would be willing to want him to change enough that she will believe it when he tells her. People can be susceptible to be willing to forego what they have learned because they have a weakness for that person, in spite of everything they have done, because they want the happy ending to be true. They want to will it into existence, and sometimes being told that they have changed is sometimes reason enough to take the leap, even if it will only lead to suffering. This is what happens to Padme, maybe albeit unwittingly, and she ended up staying with a person that loved her, yes, but was dangerous, unstable, and ultimately destructive. Even when Anakin was screaming in her face, she saw the little boy on Tatooine with a kind heart willing to do whatever it took to help people. This kind of manipulation is clear and present in both Revenge of the Sith and The Last Jedi.
Are you seriously comparing Anakin and Padme to Rey and Kylo again?
Reylo is at a crossroads. Either the pair will never speak of their feelings again and become the sexless warrior monks, the teachers to a new generation of Jedi and Sith, dark Jedi, whatever, that they might be destined to be. Or they might, in secret, just like Anakin and Padme, continue to explore their romantic connection, knowing full well that everyone around them on both sides of the conflict will judge them for it. No one else embodies this raw strength and feeling of the Force like they do, and if they act on it, the only course of action will be for both of them to be destroyed. Just like these guys. Imagine if episode 9 goes there. Imagine if the whole movie is really about an abusive relationship between two people who just so happen to be the most powerful weapons in a fight raging across the entire galaxy, under the noses of the leaders, generals, and soldiers toiling away to do what they think is right. Maybe they're the balance in the Force, two unstoppable forces colliding, for better or worse. Maybe that's what it's all been leading up to. Maybe the... Oh god, am I ruining Star Wars? So hard to tell anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately they did redeem him, even though the previous movie was building him up as the proper bad guy of the sequel trilogy and was probably never going to be redeemed, which I'll give Rian Johnson some credit for actually doing that, or at least that was the plan anyway. I'll give him some credit. But, unfortunately, that was undone by The Rise of Skywalker, and that was like the only redeeming thing about The Last Jedi, was that they weren't going for the whole redemption arc thing. But, oh well. Honestly, screw both J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. They were both terrible leads for lead director of both those movies. Actually, all three of those movies. Man, I wish we still had Colin Trevorrow being the director of Episode 9, but unfortunately we didn't get that version. And I think it would have made it like the only good sequel movie. It still wouldn't have been able to save the franchise, but it would have been better than the previous two.